I see your screen, Katie. We built in some time for some overruns, so feel free to go ahead until about 1:05.
Okay, very good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Katie Webster, and I work as one of our 3 meteorologists at North Carolina Emergency Management. So I work with the state, and this is definitely a job that I happened to come across several years ago. I've been working here just over 5 years, and since then we've really built out our meteorology capability. And meteorologists in state emergency management is something that is fairly new and evolving. Each state handles it just a little bit differently, but I really appreciate the opportunity to tell you how it works here in North Carolina. So let me give you a little bit overview about North Carolina Emergency Management, and then you can better understand where we fit in. So we are a part of the North Carolina Department of Public Safety. We're the Division of Emergency Management within the Department of Public Safety, and we have our director's boss is the Secretary of Public Safety, and he reports directly to the governor. So we have about 185 to 200 employees. We can ramp up to nearly 300 employees following a disaster, and that's the case that we're at now with Hurricane Florence and a little bit of Michael as well. And where those extra positions come from are we bring in those who have been retired or reservist positions to help us with some of that recovery work, whether it be through individual assistance or public assistance, whatever that may be. So we can ramp up pretty quickly. And then as time passes, within a year or two, that tends to go back down and deflates, and we're back down to our 180 to 200 people. We have 6 facilities located across the state. I'm located at our state EOC, which is where you see the picture, but we also have 3 branch offices. So we divide the state up into thirds. We have our western branch, we have our central branch, and our eastern branch. Each branch has a branch manager, and each branch is divided up into areas, is what we call, and that's anywhere from 5 to 7 counties that have an area coordinator. And the area coordinator works directly with the county emergency manager. So our primary customer that we help to support is county emergency managers. We are not a first response agency. We instead help county governments when their resources become overwhelmed. So the key thing with emergency management is that it starts and ends at the local level, and the state comes in when counties become overwhelmed, just like FEMA will come in when our state capabilities become overwhelmed. So the key areas for emergency management are planning, preparedness, training, response, and recovery and mitigation. And the neat thing about being a meteorologist in state emergency management is that we get to help with all aspects of these, whether it be through trainings or exercises or real life activations. We have a place because as we all are well aware, weather affects everything, and many of the events that we activate our state EOC for are for natural hazards, primarily tropical and winter weather. So we all know that we do have the National Weather Service, and we're very fortunate to have really good working relationships with all 7 of our Weather Service offices that serve North Carolina. But you may wonder, why are there in-house meteorologists working at state emergency management? Because we do have the National Weather Service. Well, where we find our role is that our state senior staff for emergency management have access to us 24/7, and we can provide on-demand briefings. So our audience is a little bit different. We focus more so on emergency managers who may need to know certain aspects of the event. So we take information from the National Weather Service, and then we're able to I won't say sift that down, but repackage that in a way to support our customer. So the main goal of our positions is to provide critical weather data and interpretation in decision-making situations to the state EOC. So one way that we do that is being able to provide on-demand briefings. So we advise our senior staff and oftentimes the governor's office during hazardous weather. The pictures that you see here on the bottom left is most recently for Hurricane Florence. So what typically happens is when our state EOC activates, the governor and his staff will come into our EOC. One of the meteorologists on staff will provide a weather update to the governor and to other members of his cabinet to prepare for the press conferences that are also held at our office, which is what you see on the right. So as I mentioned, we support all phases of emergency management: preparedness, response, mitigation, and recovery. And we do that through creating tailored products for emergency managers across the state, not only at the state level, but also the county level as well. And we place a focus on the entire state, a statewide jurisdiction, as opposed to just a specific set of counties, which is where we work closely with our National Weather Service offices, because we take all of that information and compile it into a statewide picture, since what we do is moving resources from the west to the east. It doesn't focus so much on county to county, but more so a much greater distance. And so through that, we will provide input to the situation reports or an incident action plan for events which impact our operations. We can assist in media inquiries or requests. We assist in reviewing press releases. We have a presence in our social media posts, which is something that is an evolving science, as we all know, of how do you best capture and how do you represent your agency on social media. And also in the recovery phase, we will assist in constructing FEMA declaration requests. If our recovery chief needs help in putting some information down about how the event played out, we will work with our National Weather Service partners to help document that, so that we make sure our declaration request.
Did we lose your audio, Katie? Katie, I can't hear you. There you go. I think you're back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So our job is to analyze the available information during an incident, extract out what's critical to the success of the mission, whatever that may be, and communicate that in a way that is easily understandable to the emergency management community. Our primary customers is the State Emergency Response Team, also called the CERT team. So representatives from every state agency that may be tasked to respond are part of this team. Key players are Department of Public Safety, State Highway Patrol, North Carolina National Guard, Department of Transportation, OEMS, which is our Office of Emergency Medical Services, DHHS, which is the Health and Human Services, and Department of Agriculture. So in an event, when we activate our state EOC, key partners from all of these agencies and more will come to our EOC and provide support in however long our activation lasts, and they have that ability to task their agencies with response with whatever the resource requests are. But we also have secondary customers as well, which is the County Emergency Management, FEMA, DOD, USDOT, other federal agencies. We cannot forget our disaster relief agencies. We have good working relationships with the Salvation Army, all of our VOAD, which is the Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, all of those partners who would provide mass feeding after an event, or help to do some muck and gut following a disaster. We have state, federal, and local politicians, and of course the general public, and that gets back to the social media realm. And as I mentioned, this is an evolving science and how we best serve and what our niche is here in emergency management. But what we do know is that weather impacts nearly everything that we do, whether it be that's what you're responding for or that affects how you are responding. So we really, our job looks a little bit different each day. So things that emergency managers want to know, and as I mentioned, we help support county emergency managers when their resources become overwhelmed. What they want to know is the threats and the impacts and the locations and the timing and the confidence. They want to know what is going to impact them, when, and for how long, and what does that mean for them. And one thing that I've included here is a spaghetti plot, which can kind of be contradictory to what you would think you wanted county emergency managers looking at. But I wanted to put this in here to remember to talk a little bit about this. So spaghetti plots in the realm of emergency management can be a sticky situation, because we don't want people relying too much on this, but obviously it's out there and available to the general public. And as we've all seen, these tend to go around, spread very quickly when we're looking at an approaching storm. And what we find ourselves doing as meteorologists in emergency management is using these tools that people already have access to, and educate them, educate those who may not be scientifically savvy on how the best way to use these are. It's not about keeping people from using these, but it's educating them on how they can best be used. So while this may not be the best product to look at ahead of a hurricane, we try to defer everyone to the National Hurricane Center, since we do use National Weather Service products. But this helps us in planning, so they want to know what the probability is, what our confidence is, and so we try to use these tools smartly. What they don't want to know is a lot of what we learn in school and what we're used to talking about within our fairly close community, whether it be synoptic or mesoscale weather or climate change or sea surface temperatures and charts and numbers. They don't want to know that. And above all else, what they especially don't want to know is what I think their course of action should be. That is not our role in emergency management. It's not to tell them what their course of action should be, but rather give them the information they need to make the decision themselves. And that's ultimately because they know what their thresholds are, and you never realize how much plays into a decision, like politics and like money and like times of year, if you're talking about an evacuation. So um, you have to know, we have to learn what it is they want to know and what it is what our realm that we stay away from is. So I think I mentioned that we actually only use National Weather Service forecast products to support the state emergency response team. That helps to establish a common operating picture between state and federal agencies, and it helps with the simplicity as well. County governments are not required to use National Weather Service forecasts, which is what makes it a little bit of a tricky thing, because we could all be speaking off of a different sheet of music. So we at the state help to only use National Weather Service products to alleviate at least some of that. And some of the things that we run into, especially ahead of a hurricane or a big time weather event, is the differences in opinions on what may happen based on what people's opinions are. History plays into it. If we have a county emergency manager who has lived in the county all of his life and is determined that hurricanes always turn out to sea before we get here, we have to figure out how we counter that and educate them on what the situation is, and provide the information that they need, while also being sensitive to the decisions that they have to make. As we are very well aware, there's a lot of weather noise when a disaster is about to happen. We have the Weather Channel that travels. We have models that may or may not be wrong. We have blogs that say that we're all going to die if we don't do something. And all of this are things that we're trying to balance. And we continue to get better as a team at anticipating what questions we may have, and anticipating what weather noise we may be encountering, and being able to combat that ahead of time, whether it be through briefs to our senior staff, or emails, or just some basic education on what products are available, what they say and what they don't say, and making sure that we are very much in line with our state and federal partners on forecasts and actions, and what actually needs to happen. And contrary to what I thought when I first started, there's more to emergency management than helicopter rescues and photo ops. There are political decisions. There's money related to it. There is uh, people going off of what they need. Each disaster is a little bit different in how we handle it, but we definitely get into a rhythm of what we can anticipate the questions being. So conflicting weather predictions and other non-weather concerns can cause emergency managers to make delayed and less than optimal decisions. So it's our job to ensure a common operating picture is maintained so that does not happen. So that's a little bit about our concept of operations and what we do. I wanted to talk a little bit about what our day-to-day looks like. And honestly, it can be a little bit different depending on the time of year. in blue sky days, we use our platform that we've built up over the past couple of years, and we want to make sure that everyone remains situationally aware of weather, whether that be during blue sky days or during hazardous weather. So we send out a daily weather update each day, regardless of the weather type. And it changes based on what group we send it to. So some days, if it's really nice weather, we would do a 7-day forecast, or maybe a weekend weather outlook, or even some fun weather related things like the summer solstice or the eclipse. We send out that things because we want people to know that we are here and that we are a reliable source of information when weather becomes a little more complicated. So we try to maintain that communication with our county partners and our CERT partners, and anyone can be on these distribution lists. We have anything from law offices to county emergency management to hospitals, and you never really know how many people look at this information until one day you don't send it for whatever reason, and then a lot of emails come saying, "Hey, are you going to send a weather update today?" But that's what we kind of do in more blue days. In hazard weather, we kind of shift gears, and our state EOC activates. Usually, the focus shifts to us, at least for several days, especially if it's a weather event. And we work with our National Weather Service offices and the Hurricane Center and our Hurricane Liaison team to make sure that we are in line with whatever the forecast says, whether it be for hurricanes or severe weather or winter weather. And we spend a lot of time making weather graphics to send out that are tailored to emergency managers, and some of our state emergency response team partners. And what we try to do, as you can see here in the bottom left, is take a statewide approach. So we try to combine the forecast and lay it out on a statewide view so that our decision makers know where the biggest impact will be and how they need to adjust their response posture to meet the anticipated needs of the counties. For example, with the expected snowfall amounts, if they need to move trucks from Greenville over to Asheville, this state picture allows them to know that, as opposed to just driving down on Greenville or another specific area. And remembering back to what I told you about what emergency managers want to know, they want to know the timing, they want to know the impact. So we try to make sure that we include that. And in terms of our threat levels, as you can see in the upper left, we try to mirror that of the National Weather Service. And sometimes the offices differ from event to event, but we try to mirror that so that there is one common voice. The picture may look a little bit differently, but the information is exactly the same, and a lot of time is just regurgitated in a different format. And so this prompts action on our part. It informs some of the trigger points for emergency management senior staff, and it gives people something to work off of. So that actually concludes my brief, and I'm certainly very happy to take any questions, and thank you for allowing us the time to speak on this today.
All right, thank you, Katie. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the question box down there. If you're able to address them to all, so everybody can see them, that would be great. As you can see, Katie and I have the same meteorology degree, and it's a very different job. And so part of the reason I wanted to get Katie in here talking is that a lot of times with operational meteorology, you may hear about the weather service and things like that, but you don't hear about these other things that you can get into. And so it really is, a different job, but it is also the same job in many ways as well. A lot of different avenues. And one thing I'd like to point out is that North Carolina may be different from other states and how they work. So look in your home states to see what the setup is. Do they employ meteorologists? Do they not? How does it work? Because everybody's a little bit different there with how it's run.
Absolutely, Ryan, and we see when we look at our neighboring states how it's handled a little bit differently. That's absolutely the case, and especially across all hurricane-prone states, programs are set up a little bit differently, not just the weather piece, but also emergency management structure overall. And one thing that I did want to mention is a little bit about our schedule, because I feel like that is definitely a something different between you and I. So day to day, we are 8 to 5, and it's a state job, so we have the typical benefits, but very much outside of hazardous weather, we are routine Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 jobs. When our state EOC activates, and especially days ahead of that, if we are anticipating hazardous weather, our schedule changes a little bit. We do not go 24/7, as in we as in our weather staff. The EOC is manned 24/7, and we may have staff here overnight. But because we serve county emergency managers and they cannot safely operate when it's dark outside, especially if you have a winter storm or a hurricane, um, we have found that our best strategy is to front load our weather support during times when the county is out and moving, so basically in daylight. So we may stretch our hours, we may work some long days for an extended period of time, but day to day we do not have shift work outside of just an occasional, we need to send a weather update over the email because we're watching a tropical system, or like for example, yesterday we stayed late to provide some severe weather support for election day. It's kind of a hit or miss thing, which is certainly different than some of the other areas where you may find a role in meteorology.
That's a great point, especially on the schedule. If you have a family, it can be much more conducive to, getting to spend a lot more time with them, which is definitely one of the negatives of the rotating shift work in the weather service. That's a good point. I wanted to ask too. You heard in the last talk how complicated, and I'm sure you know how complicated the process is for hiring in the weather service. Did you find hiring the process was shorter or easier for the state EM, or was it about the same?
So it can vary depending on it varies depending on how many positions are open with state government. We like to say that we move at the speed of state government. It certainly is not guaranteed to be any faster, but we have tried to make improvements overall as an agency to make it faster. So a position will post, and that is found on our North Carolina jobs website along with any other state job. So you filter down through emergency management and find whatever you're interested in. So a position will typically be posted for at least 2 weeks, sometimes a little bit longer, just depending on if the position is currently vacant or if someone is anticipated to retire, that kind of thing. So it's at least open for several weeks, if not 30 days. And you make an online profile, which seemed to be very similar to the USA Jobs. You make an online profile with North Carolina Jobs website, and you submit your profile, and then the period will close. And after that, it is very much up to our department HR, which is outside of our division, to filter those packages and get them to the hiring supervisor. And that can take anywhere from 2 weeks to a month and a half. It really has seemed to vary. Once that time passes, the hiring supervisor will get the top 10 most quote unquote qualified candidates based on keywords and the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are posted with each job posting. So if you ever were to apply, I would encourage you to really focus on the knowledge, skills, and abilities and linking your profile to what it says the position requires. When the hiring manager gets the top 10 qualified packages, it's really up to them on how quickly they go through it, which usually that's usually pretty speedy. And depending on the number of qualified candidates they feel like they have, they can go back and ask for more packages to review. Sometimes they need to, and sometimes they feel pretty comfortable with what they have. And then interviews are scheduled. So overall, that can take anywhere from 2 to 4 months. So when we interview people, we say, we hope to try to educate them on where we are in the process, whether it be we have 2 more weeks of interviews or you're the last interviews. We will make our recommendation, try to help manage those expectations. But it can certainly be on the spans of months before that person were to hear anything. Um, Most everyone that I have interviewed or participated on an interview panel with, the supervisor will give them their card and say, we're not really, there's only a certain part of this process that we're in charge of. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions along the way, or you want to check the status of where we're at in the process, because um, the the HR department who filters our applications are also the ones who filter it for all of state government, and that gets pretty large at any given time. So it can span 2 to 4 months. That's not uncommon.
So it sounds like there's still red tape, but maybe not quite as much as the federal government, which makes sense. Katie's email is there if you want to reach out to her on the screen. We do have one question from Caitlin, it looks like. Let me get back to my questions here. Do you need an emergency management minor or major to be able to work as a meteorologist in emergency management?
No, you do not. So we have 3 staff, me and 2 others. Um, I do have my master's in emergency management, but honestly, that was um, because I was not ready to pay my student loans back at the time. So I needed a program that was online, and I had found interest in emergency management, though I was not in my current position yet. But the only thing that we require when we post a job for a meteorologist would be a meteorology degree. And that's a fairly new occurrence. In years past, before I started, it focused more on a natural hazards background. So we would get anything from beekeepers to prison guards to anything that they felt like they could connect themselves. But the only thing that we do put on there is a degree of meteorology, and there is no major or minor in emergency management required. What I would suggest, though, if you ever did apply or ever look to that, is utilize the FEMA online ICS courses, which is the independent study. If you Google FEMA independent study, you can find a long list of courses that you can take for free online, and that will allow you to front load your application to show that while I may not have a formal education background in emergency management, I'm interested and I've taken the courses to know the terminology. And it just kind of, I think that could really boost your application. But to answer your question, no, it is not required. But those free online resources are available.